And as we've been telling you, a champion for political equality and human rights has died. Ed Broadbent helped the New Democratic Party expand its movement. The populist was remembered for speaking his mind and never shying from a fight. Those qualities won him friends and admirers across the aisle. And as Hannah tells us, Broadbent was above all down to earth and devoted to Canada.
He was the type of politician Canadians felt they knew on a first-name basis. Ed Broadbent first ran for the NDP in 1968 in his hometown and Conservative stronghold of Oshawa, Ontario. And he surprised everyone when he won. And it was just by 15 votes.
We need to make sure that every
3 years later, Broadbent made his first attempt at leadership, but finished fourth behind David Lewis.
Ed Broadbent to come to the platform.
After Lewis retired in 1975, Broadbent captured the leadership. He moved the NDP to the left, and the NDP moved up in the polls.
All I'm saying is that I am running, like Mr. Clark and Mr. Trudeau, to become Prime Minister of Canada.
The 1988 election was a campaign fought over free trade, and it pushed Broadbent's NDP to the brink of a breakthrough.
Canadians are not about to build a Canada on the values of John Turner's vision of Bay Street as a replacement for Brian Mulroney's Wall Street. They are going to be rejecting both of them out of hand.
Opinion polls prior to the election suggested the party was surging. At the time, Broadbent became the most successful NDP leader in history, with 43 seats. But he fell short of his own high hopes. There had been an expectation the NDP would at least become official opposition.
After an election, I sit down and I am with my wife here, and we think of what is good in terms of our personal life, what is good for my party, and what is good for my country.
The next year, Broadbent stepped down as leader. He had spent 20 years in the House of Commons, 15 as party leader.
Now is the time to pick a new man or a woman to lead this party.
Broadbent took up human rights issues, campaigning against abuses in countries such as China, and stayed involved in domestic issues as well, trying to eradicate child poverty. But Broadbent's political career wasn't over just yet. After more than a decade outside of the House of Commons, he was lured back by Jack Layton.
Who's back?
Ed is back.
Say what?
And he reintroduced himself to a new generation of voters with a rap video.
It's time for voting, NDP.
And won a seat for the NDP in Ottawa.
If Jack Layton hadn't made a certain phone call last November, it wouldn't have happened. When he raised the subject of me, it was the furthest thought from my mind, and did not take me long from a political point of view. Not long at all.
In 2005, he announced he wouldn't seek re-election. He wanted to care for his wife, Lucille, who died of breast cancer in 2006. In 2011, he helped establish a political think tank aimed at exploring social democratic ideas, bearing his name, the Broadbent Institute.
The idea of this is to create in Canada an institution at arm's length from the New Democratic Party.
The NDP continued to turn to Broadbent for advice about the party he devoted so much of his life to.
A leader that's so generous with your time and so helpful. Thank you.
Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Kate McKenna is in our CBC bureau watching this pretty major breaking story about, a political titan in this country. So tell us more about Ed Broadbent's life and legacy, Kate.
Well, to your point, Andrew, this is really a man who not only shaped the NDP, of course, as one of the most successful leaders of the NDP, but also shaped Canadian political thought more broadly. And so this is a man who was born in Oshawa. His father, was a clerk at General Motors. His mother was a homemaker at the time. He later went on to attribute that background as a foundation for his views. But he, as we heard Anne McGrath say a few minutes ago, was a brilliant man. He had a stint in academics that really kind of shaped his thought before he launched himself into politics. And, he was very popular, particularly during a stretch in the 80s. New Democrats called him Honest Ed, Mr. Decent, or Ed. One kind of interesting kind of story about him is that at the height of his popularity, Chatelaine magazine listed him as one of Canada's top 10 sexiest men. His wife, I guess, at the time said, there are many good things I would call Ed, but sexy, no. Lucille, his wife, he said, the love of his life. She died in 2006. And of course, his contributions to the NDP are very significant. We heard Hannah just a few minutes ago sort of laying out, he was the leader for more than a decade. He was a very strong voice in the discussions around free trade. And then, of course, he had his political resurgence in later years. And I do expect that we will be hearing from other people involved with the NDP, perhaps Jagmeet Singh, about his lasting legacy. But through the Broadbent, through his think tank, the Broadbent Institute, his thought and his legacy continues to live on, and I suspect we will be hearing more from people affiliated with that later. But I just want to read again what Brian Topp, the Broadbent Institute chair of the board of directors, said. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, Andrew, but I'll just repeat it. Ed combined a lifelong passion for justice and equality with a passion for life itself and all the joys and happiness it has to offer. He was an extraordinary parliamentarian and political leader. He was a deeply thoughtful intellectual, and he was wonderful company and a most wonderful friend to have. All those who knew him will miss him, celebrate him, and hopefully do what he would most want of us, which is to carry on his work. So we are expecting more tributes in the hours ahead.